Phase 2 then was, if that proved to have some benefits, Phase 2 then would move on to include the field survey work, and we would have to resurvey all the FEMA cross-sections, and the study reach was defined really from the end of the McMillan remap, which was the U of I project, all the way up to the Steiner-White Bridge crossing further upstream on the Troy Highway. So that was going to be the study reach, and they would resurvey all the FEMA cross-sections within that reach, and then do a more in-depth full modeling analysis given that topographic information to determine what the resulting floodplain would look like. And then Phase 3 would include their technical support and assistance to move through what's called the letter of map revision process, which is where you petition to FEMA to modify the flood map based upon your new study and your new enhanced and more accurate data and information. So the Phase 1 work was completed just in January, and the initial results did indicate there were some fairly significant flood elevation reductions, but with the quality of the information in the FEMA model and the age, it was somewhat difficult to really identify the exact scope of the area where these improvements would be observed. There are a number of inconsistencies of the placements of cross-sectioning and stationing. So really what that all means is it's a two-dimensional model, and it's hard to place it on the ground where the floodplains would actually fall. But the analysis did indicate fairly substantial reductions, at least in the area just upstream of the 95 crossing. And just to kind of give you some examples, there are two runs here. So these are station numbers, 105, 104, and there's an effective model run. That's the current FEMA model, and it has such things such as the flood elevation and the top width, so how wide is the floodplain in that area. And so you can see the effective model, for example, in station 105, had a flood elevation of 2570.8, and then had a top floodplain width of 737.3 feet. And then when you looked at the updated model, when it was run, the elevation dropped almost a foot there, and the floodplain width reduced down to 400 feet. So this is what's highlighted here are the differences. So flood elevations dropped 0.7 of a feet, and the width of the floodplain was reduced by 335 feet. And then if you go just a little bit farther downstream, closer to the 95 crossing, flood elevations were reduced by over 1.5 feet, and the floodplain width went from 795 feet to 28.6 feet in width. So you had a 767-foot reduction of the floodplain widths. What's kind of difficult is pinning down where exactly those occur. So this red line represents 795 feet in width, just trying to find out, based on the prior model, when was the first point that you reached that width? And that's where that line is approximately shown. And then if you also look at that width, the new model is indicating a floodplain width of 28.6 feet, which is roughly that green line. Now, it's a little bit difficult to say that's exactly where it occurred, but this is really just intended to illustrate kind of the scale of the relative changes that were indicated by the model. The next channel, the next station upstream, again, the prior effective map was 737 feet and shown to reduce to 400. And that's essentially the next point where you reach that width, and then again the 400-foot width here. So the one thing that I guess Alta could confirm is the current model is inaccurate, but they really couldn't provide definitively what they think it would be until they actually got out and surveyed it. That really was the conclusion. But they did see that there were some fairly large changes in the effort, the modeling that they did. And again, this again is just a cross-section, kind of similar to the one I showed before, but this is just their model run cross-section with the floor of the channel. And again, this is the effective elevation on the map, and then this is their modeling. It appeared to indicate this reduction. So you see the most significant reduction really where that concrete bridge was, fairly large reductions at that point, and then going about 200-300 feet upstream, you're getting about 4 inches to half a foot change. So, but they really felt that it was, with the quality of data they had and the age of the model, this is really not conclusive. They cautioned that they really don't know what it'll show once we go out and survey it, but they felt that in order to really answer the question, that was what would need to occur. So as I mentioned, there are a number of consistencies, and not to mention that they entered the 95 bridge based on construction documents and not surveying it, so they kind of fudged it in, the new bridge. So that's not necessarily precise, and there is some risk that after the phase 2 analysis, there could be some other changes that have occurred since that time. Could have had some sedimentation in the channel, could be some other things, so we may not necessarily see the large change. but we really won't know until we actually do that work. So I just want to make sure that everybody's aware of that if we're here a couple months from now saying that, well, there wasn't such a large change, or there's some other things, or maybe it was a very large change. But we really won't be able to tell that for certain without doing that work. So as I mentioned, so it really requires us to move forward into the phase 2 study. Also provided an estimate to the agency to complete that work in the amount of $15,891. And the agency, as I mentioned, funded phase 1 and has actually authorized moving forward with phase 2, but felt this was a perfect opportunity for the city and the agency to partner in the effort. As I mentioned, about half the properties are within the district, about a half are outside the district. And while the agency's primary focus is facilitating the redevelopment of that area, there are also city residents that have properties that are required to carry flood insurance that would benefit from this as well. Staff has identified 2 potential funding sources, so if that was split roughly equally at about $8,000 per partner, the city has identified $5,000 within community development planning services that could be utilized to fund this effort. And then I think there's a memo from the city supervisor indicating that the council could choose to utilize another $3,000 from the legislative reserve fund to fund the additional gap in the cost of the work. So that was the estimate. I think it was included in your packet as well. So the consideration for the council this evening is determine whether the council wishes to participate in this process, utilizing the 2 funding sources that were identified, or take other action as you deem appropriate. With that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Bill? That was pretty in-depth, Bill. I read through it, and I think you're light years ahead of most of us on being able to explain that and getting it through. But that was, it's very important, in my view, that we move forward with these, but this is council's decision, so what do you think, Jenny?
I wholeheartedly agree. In a couple areas, you're light years ahead of us in understanding it, Bill. But I also believe that if we're going to make any decisions based on old data, it's incumbent upon us to get it updated. And we don't really understand, like even in that pink and green line, we don't really understand what the boundaries are even. So I think it's important, and I like the idea of the partnership. I kind of dig that, working with the URA. So I'm going to be very in favor of doing this.
All right.
Yeah, I'd like to echo Gina's thoughts on that we might as well be working off of real data. And the fact is, the floodplain is not likely to get any bigger and can certainly have a beneficial effect by its reduction in size that one might anticipate from the results of the study to benefit the homeowners and their flood insurance rates, and also to assist in sparking redevelopment of some of those less than glorious properties that exist within that area. So I think it's got nothing but benefit written all over it, and I think it would be money very well invested on the part of the city as a whole.
Yeah, I think that the city is getting a pretty good bargain to basically pay for half of it when all of it is within city property. So I think it's a great way to partner with the URA, who's willing to pay for half of it. And I said this at the URA meeting. I think if this is outdated, we were obligated to have accurate information for all the citizens over there that are impacted by that.
Can I ask that you bring it back so we can geek out again? That was pretty cool. I really like that, and I like the green and red, the green and pink lines.
We'll
So
report
remember
back
that
on the
next time
outcome.
you bring it back, please.
Ann?
I had the opportunity to ask this at the admin committee as well, but I wanted to know if you anticipated there would be a cost associated with phase 3, and if so, if you'd be approaching the city again, and if you had any idea what that amount might be.
So I would estimate that phase 3 is probably going to be somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000 of additional expense. So if we get through phase 2 and determine that there's enough benefit to warrant pursuing a letter of map revision, it is probably likely we would probably want to continue that partnership between the city and the council. We'll have to just see how the phase 2 study proceeds.
You had it, Catherine. Did you have a question?
I'm just going to move.
I have one more question. How long does phase 2 take?
At this point in time, the task order that I've issued has them completion by April 16th.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, March 16th, not April 16th.
Even better.
So we're trying to wrap it up by the middle of March. There is approximately, I think, about a 2 to 3 month processing time for FEMA. So if we decide there is benefit and the city wants to sponsor moving forward with the remapping effort, Once we get that in, it'll probably take about 3 months for FEMA to review and make a decision on the remapping. But the current task order has it completed by March 16th for Phase 2.
Okay. Brandy?
Can you, or maybe Gary, just explain why that 3,000 is coming from the non-prioritized budget, how that determination is made?
Well, it's an unbudgeted line item. So, Bill, in his budget, community development has $5,000 for professional services for unidentified planning services. The request here was for $8,000. So rather than overrun that line item, we look for alternates to see where we can fund that. So in looking there, we had $20,000 in non-prioritized projects, which is a line item that is utilized by the council for projects they hadn't anticipated at the beginning of the year. If Bill, for instance, had $10,000 in unidentified planning projects, and he wanted to utilize or had that capacity, we would have identified that. Or if he had a project that was not moving ahead, that he could utilize that funding, he'd be coming forward requesting administration's authority to move that forward. So it's just a place to fund it that we hadn't anticipated. We try not to overrun line items when we can help it.
Makes sense.
Do it.
I move to approve city project contribution of $5,000 from line item number 102-120-10-642-40 and $3,000 from the non-prioritized projects line item 101-010-10-670-16 for Phase 2 of the floodplain study.
A second. Oh, Ann got it.
Okay. All right, we've got a motion by Catherine, a second by Ann, to approve the project construction of $5,000 from line item 101-10-10-642-40 and $3,000 from non-prioritized projects, line item 101-010-10-67-670-16 for Phase 2 of the floodplain study. We all good? I'll start the roll with Ann.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you, Bill, for that good presentation.